Hi, I'm Polly Toner, here for another in our series where we put a pastor on the hot seat. Let's welcome Reverend John Vest, youth pastor at Fourth Presbyterian Church in Chicago. He's here with 15-year-old Erika Force and 16-year-old Jeffrey McGuire. Welcome.
Thank you.
This is your opportunity to put Reverend Vest in a hot seat. What would you like to know?
Well, I think there's a lot of controversial things in today's society, such as same-sex marriage. Do you consider that non-Christian?
I personally don't consider it not Christian. I think it's, it's a difficult question within the church and throughout our society. And people think different things within the church. And it's complicated, I think, because we have our experience today and our faith tradition, and sometimes those things aren't always on the same page. And so we look at the Bible, and strictly speaking, there are certainly places in the Bible that would tend to argue against same-sex relationships or same-sex marriages, but then there are other places in the Bible that talk about God's grace and God's love that seem to open a door to different ways and ways that our society can change and can still be faithful to our faith and to our God, and that's an issue where I think that's the case, that we think about sexuality and we think about relationships in a different way than people did in biblical times. And so our challenge from the church is to say, how can we take these truths that we know from Scripture and think about them in new ways in our world today? And on that issue, I think that God creates people in different ways, and if that sexuality is part of your God-given self, that to deny that and to keep people from expressing that, to me seems not Christian. And that if we think about what Jesus taught to love our neighbors as ourselves, in a lot of ways throughout church history, that's been a rule of thumb that we followed in order to think about how we might change the ways that we think about things. I mean, there was a time when women were not allowed to be pastors in the church, and there's some places in the Bible that justify that, and faithful people began to think, well, if we're taught to love our neighbors as ourselves, are we being truly loving toward our female church leaders to deny them that kind of access? And at least in our church, in the Presbyterian Church, USA, we decided that no, that's not being truly loving, and so we've changed our position on that. And I think the issue of sexuality, whether it's ordination of gays and lesbians or same-sex marriage, is a place where we're really struggling as a church, and we're just trying to follow where we feel God is leading us. And the challenge, of course, is that different people feel different things, and I guess I personally don't see anything wrong with same-sex marriage.
How do we know that when we die, we go someplace that's not here and not just become nothing?
That's a good question, and that's one I've struggled with for a long time. I remember even when I was in high school, after people died, and I wondered, how do we know that that person went to heaven or is with Jesus, is what they always said in the church that I was growing up in. And I thought about it even more when I was in seminary. During my training, we go through a program where we're like a chaplain at various places, and I happened to be a chaplain at a hospital, and I was dealing with people dying all the time, and it made me think a lot about how we know that. And this may not be the answer you're looking for, I don't know, but I'm not real sure that we do know what happens when we die in real great detail. If you look in the Bible, the people that wrote the Bible had some very different ideas about what happens when you die. Like in the Old Testament, it's sort of like in Greek religion that when you die, everyone goes to this place, and the Greeks called it Hades, but the ancient Israelites called it Sheol. And it's just like sort of this place where everyone goes, and you're kind of a spirit, and it's not really heaven or hell. By the time of Jesus, there had developed this whole idea of heaven and hell, and you go to one or the other of those when you die. But no one really has sort of come back from the other end of that and said, here in exacting details what happens when you die. And so for me, I think it's a matter of faith, and it's about hope, that we have this hope that I almost think more than just reading it in a book, it's sort of inborn in who we are as people, that this is not all that there is, that there's something beyond, and it's shared, I think, by lots of people, and certainly within the Christian tradition. And this notion, this hope and this promise that we have from God in Scripture and in our common life together, that this world is not the end, and the pain and suffering and hurt of this world is not all that there is. And ultimately, as Christians, sort of our sign of that is our belief in the resurrection of Jesus. So I guess there was, at least one person that came back from that. But when Jesus came back, there wasn't talking a whole lot about here's exactly what you should expect. But instead, and like at our church, when we remember someone who's died, we talk about it a lot of times in the concept of the hope of resurrection that we have. And for me, I guess that's where I settle. But because I really, in all honesty, don't get a whole lot out of folks that try to talk very specifically about what happens when you die, because I think that's just something that we can't know, and we don't know until you are at that point. Because certainly from our perspective, what happens when you die is you get buried and you decompose. But the hope is, I think, that there's more to it than just that.
If things happen for a reason, why do bad things happen to good people?
For me, instead, I try to focus on where is God in the present. And more often than not, I've discovered when bad things happen to good people, God is there to help us deal with those things and to bind us up in love as we try to move beyond that hurt and that pain. Because I think it's a reality of life that bad things happen, to good or bad, and sometimes for no apparent reason. Part of me wants to say, well, God, is much greater than all of us, and maybe has some sort of plan in mind. But by the same token, my personal faith, I can't wrap my mind around any sort of belief in God that would say that God is intentionally going to kill somebody or do something bad to someone in order to create some other situation. Like sometimes, like if someone dies tragically, an answer might be, well, God did that maybe to create faith in other people or to help me grow. And I think there's got to be a better way for me to grow than for my cousin to die, from cancer. And so instead, I think those things happen. That's just sort of the world that we live in. And where God enters in is how we deal with those things and how we work together to try to make goodness out of badness. I mean, it's the same thing. Jesus died on a cross. I mean, that was a horrible tragedy. God's answer to that is the resurrection. And for me, that gives us hope that there's nothing in the world that's beyond redemption. Everything that is bad, I think, can be redeemed in some sort of way. And part of our lives as Christians is to try to be open to God and to be conduits of God for each other. That God taught, again, Jesus tells us to love God and to love each other. And if we do that, then we'll feel God's presence here with us.